hit the record button. And it says it's recording, but it doesn't say it's recording to my computer.
See, it says recording on my screen.
All right. Well, then let's welcome everybody. It's so good to have you with us today. I'm Scott McDonald, and this is my sidekick, Mike Green. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. All right, now here's the deal. We have a recurring thing. This is the third of three about psychography. Now, one of the things that just has disappointed me to no end is when I'm seeing what everybody else is getting for more money, in fact, than what we're charging. And they will give you numbers on competition, and they tell you nothing about the area, really. And that's why psychographics is so vitally important. I'm going to actually today give you examples of psychographics. I want you to see what actually has happened. So you'll be able to say, hey, I get it now. Let me go ahead and share my screen for a second here. The deal is I want you to have the resources that you need to make important decisions on your site. When you do psychographics, what you're learning is not just, for instance, competition, but the type of competition there is. You're not only gaining the idea of how big the population is, you're finding out what type of population is it? What do they favor? What do they want? What do they need? And that's what psychographics is all about. So I'm waiting for this to come up. Now, again, these are examples and actual cases. So let me go ahead and make the case and show you what I'm talking about when we talk about psychographics. Boy, the old computer's a little slow. You know, like I said, it was a mistake to buy an Atari. I don't think that was the right move.
An Atari, yeah. I'm surprised you're able to find one, frankly.
Well, you know, I've had this for the very longest time. Okay.
Kind of a rough start this morning, Scott.
Yeah, would you please? Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. All right.
All right, here I go. Take a look at examples of what we're doing. Now, here's something I want you to understand. When you're doing psychographics, it's not just one simple thing. There are things called life modes. And life modes are a little bit more ham-fisted way to look at the population that there is. There are 14 life modes. Very often, a life mode is the kind of setting, like it's an urban, suburban, rural. Is it renters or owners? And so it takes a larger population characteristic into account. When it comes to lifestyle groups, or actual what psychographics are, there are 67 of them that are in the life modes. Now, 67 is a lot. Remember, all of this originally started out with 9 when Arnold Mitchell did the 9 American lifestyles. Now it's much more complex. Now, you may ask yourself, why don't other companies do psychographics? It's because it takes much more training, experience, and higher levels of math when you're sampling a population and projecting as to what is going to happen for a particular profession. So you may be looking at the same lifestyle for veterinarians and for optometrists and for dentists, but the way they manifest themselves is very different. I'll explain as we go through. Now, just as a quick review of what we looked at last time, people can be distinguished by their demands. And that's really what we're talking about. Values, what they consider is important, how they're served, how they're charged, what they want, what they need, and characteristics of their demand. So you may say, I want pride of ownership, or I want to look pretty because I want to be all sexy to other people. Or you may want to have luxury or convenience or excitement or security. So the reasons why people get what they get can be very different from each other. Now, people are familiar with wants and needs, and they tend to cluster together. And as I mentioned, if you look at your own neighborhood, housing, employment, recreation, you tend to do things with other people that have similar values and life modes. That's what we're talking about. Now, as I mentioned, there are 14 life modes. You don't need to worry about them. You don't need to worry about psychographic groups, because when we do research, what we will tell you is this is the kind of people who are in your area already. Usually we'll give you the 3 largest. But if you're doing a marketing report, we may actually do 10 of the largest ones by population, and we'll list them in order. So just be aware that what you're getting is kind of deep research that other people don't often have the ability to give. So let's talk about sample life modes. I'm going to take 2 life modes. Now, what's interesting is both of these life modes are primarily urban. They're found in big cities and downtown areas. There are different life modes that are suburban and rural. Now, I'm using these 2 because these 2 life modes have about the same age, and they have somewhat similar marital patterns, but they're definitely urban. Now, I say that because when we're talking about what people's needs are, needs vary primarily with age. So if people have the same age, they're going to generally have the same healthcare needs. The one I'm going to use is the middle ground. The middle grounds are 30-somethings. They're mostly urban. They're fairly well educated, but if they don't have education right now, they will. And as I'll mention later, they tend to go to community colleges. These are not people who go to the Ivy Leagues. The high societies is a different life mode. They're much more affluent, much more well-educated, and they own the places they live, very often condominiums. They are almost every time white-collar professional people. Middle grounds are going to be service-oriented people. Now, please understand, there is not one good group and one bad group. If you're going to find a population that you want to serve, or you're buying a practice, or you're in a place right now, and you want to know, what do these people like? What do I need to do to change the practice to make it really hum? You need to know psychographics. So like I said, it's not like one is good, one is bad. They're just different. Now, the 2 that I'm going to contrast, one is in the middle ground, one is in the more affluent people. The downtown melting pot people is one interesting group. And again, they're about the same age as the other group I'm going to talk about. They're lower middle class socioeconomically. They usually have a high school education and some college. They're likely to go to a local college, and they're very significantly Asian, particularly Chinese. But Filipinos and Vietnamese are big within these lifestyle modes. They practice yoga, they play tennis, they have money market accounts, they have a Costco card and BJ's Marketplace Club. They listen to all news radio. Many of them were born outside the United States, but have come here and are really into the American dream. Now, that means something important for you who are healthcare professionals who can make that happen. Another group, the high society life mode that I'm looking at, are the laptops and lattes. Now, they're about the same age, and they live in the urban areas. So they've got some things in common, but they're otherwise quite different. These people tend to be employed in professions or managerial jobs. High-tech jobs are very common with laptops and lattes. They're likely to be white. They usually like to play around on their computers. Yes, you actually can find people who are in their 30s who play D&D, and laptops and lattes are among them. They're gamers. Many are active and very health conscious. They listen to classical hit radio stations, and a larger than average percentage of the laptops and lattes are gay. Now, what's interesting about it, if we talk about the homosexual population, some are male, some are female. They'll tend to be more male. But almost a large percentage of laptops and lattes are cohabitating with someone but not married. Now, ultimately, these 2 groups have a lot in common, like I said, but they're very different socioeconomically, ethnically, and what they want out of a particular population. Let me jump right ahead. The downtown melting pots tend to have a PPO, preferred provider organization. They are living in apartments. The laptops and lattes are also living in similar housing sizes, but they tend to own their homes. They live in condominiums. The downtown melting pots have a much lower socioeconomic. I mean, in other words, they're making a median household income of about $44,000. That doesn't define them, but it certainly describes them. Median age is about 37. The average household size is 2.89. In the United States, the average is 2.4. Now, downtown melting pot people aren't necessarily good or bad in terms of healthcare needs, but often they're more inclined to seek out people who can help them with their function. They live in large buildings where people are rent, 20 plus units. The vacancy rate is low. In other words, they're living in places where a lot of people want to live. When they do have a car, it's usually a foreign car. They have some college. Labor force participation rate is 59.3%, slightly lower than the rest of the United States, which usually means that someone is at home not working and someone is out there working. They're careful shoppers. They are big coupon people. Now, with healthcare practice, you may or may not think that coupons are a good idea. Downtown melting pot people like it. They're also big believers in getting referrals from other people. They do carry debt on their credit cards, and they have a pretty good credit rating. They try to buy low-calorie or low-fat food, but enjoy pizza delivery. They are big into their espresso and cappuccino machines. Now, you may say, well, are they going to be good for me or good not? I don't want you to think about the lifestyle groups as being favorable or unfavorable. I want you to think, if I've got a practice in this location, how can I take advantage of the people or get the people from this area? And what motivations are there to come? There are a lot of people who have, from their youth, don't have very good health care. So, for instance, with dentistry, they're not particularly strong on it. But let's talk about if you're a veterinarian serving this population. Yeah, they're likely to have a dog, but they're usually going to be small dogs, and they'll usually have one. If you happen to want to do feline practice, they'll have cats at a higher rate than others. And so they really like walk-in kinds of practices. Signage is very important to get them in the door. Now, let's talk about the laptops and lattes. Again, about the same age, but make more than twice the same amount of money. Their household income is about $112,000. Much higher income. They probably got money from their parents. Household size is much smaller, 1.85. Whereas the other group had a 2.7, let's say, household. These people don't have any children, no children living at home, that's very rare. Yes, they do have renter occupancy, but the ownership of their condominium is higher, and they would like to make that higher. They also have much higher educational attainment. And they probably went to a more expensive school. And incidentally, one thing they haven't told you is they got a lot more debt from student loans. Now, they're environmentally conscious. They happen to be politically liberal, and they're very dependent upon their technology. Now, if you're trying to advertise to laptops and lattes, doing Google ads, doing Facebook ads even, is going to be much better. On the other hand, the other group, the downtown types, they're going to want to look at signage. They're going to be doing things through word of mouth. They will also be more dependent on coupons that arrive in the mail. Now, what I've just shown you is how they consider the clinical needs that they have, and they're quite different. How they hear about you is going to be different. Knowing what they value about your practice is going to be different. Now, laptops and lattes are going to be more inclined, if you happen to be a dentist, to want to do tooth whitening. And they'll spend a lot of money on that. The other group, more function-oriented. And for that reason, the functionality of what they're doing, the downtown melting pots, may be more inclined to get care because they've been in pain or because they don't have all their teeth. They've lost a tooth, or it's weakened or in pain. So knowing that each group is going to be different as to what you want to provide, it's also going to suggest that the kind of equipment you have in your office will be different based upon their lifestyles. Now, if you happen to be, and you can read this while I'm talking, by the way, they're big Whole Foods and Trader Joe's type. So if that kind of helps, they do pay their bills. In fact, both groups are very good as far as paying their bills. They're not slackers. But one is more technical oriented, the other is less technically oriented. One is going to be more function, the other is more cosmetic in what they're looking at. And knowing these things to be true, your practice, if it knows who these people are, will be more successful because you know more about what is going to make these people come in. Now, let's say right now you're going, well, what do I have in my neighborhood right now? How do I really get a description of the psychographic groups? The marketing report is the best tool to discover lifestyles, or the psychographics. We'll tell you not only how many there are, but how large the groups are representationally. If you're thinking about moving your practice to another place, you're going to want to know what the lifestyles of the area are, so you can say, this is a good place, this is not. And again, we're offering Miracle Max 29 for this month. Mike, take it away.
All right, I will. And kind of as, I just can't emphasize enough how important psychographics are. One of the biggest questions I get, and I know I've said this on this webinar lots of times, but I always, at the end of a report analysis, when I'm talking to the doctor, where I kind of go over the details and whatever, they always ask, well, is this one good, or is this one bad, or is, and what they don't understand is, and I have pushed this many times, when you have your marketer hat on, you are agnostic. There is no good, there is no bad. It is how you are going to make a decision to place your service, or that whatever treatment philosophy that you want to have, in front of a group of people in an attractive way for them to purchase it. That's the definition of marketing. And you will go through so many thousands of dollars of guesswork if you don't understand psychographics. If you understand psychographics, you will know what it is that turns these people's crank, what it is that gets them excited, what makes them emotional, what makes them get to the place where they're going to buy. And this is no different than what the grocery store analysis people do, and every other business that's worth their salt in marketing. And this is what I would say 9.5 out of 10 people that we talk to, doctors that we talk to, have never even heard of the word psychographics. And I would say that 8 out of 10 marketers that I talk to haven't heard of the word psychographics either. And so I just can't, I'm so glad we went through this series. And if this is the first one you're watching, you need to go back to the last few to get a full understanding of psychographics. And then you need to rush to your computer and get the information from us so we can provide what psychographic groups are in your location. This isn't just some, hey, in Wisconsin, there's these 3. No, it is the 5-minute, the 10-minute, and the 15-minute radius from your address. We will give you those psychographic segments. And that description, and Scott gave you a couple examples, but we'll give you that description for your location. I don't know, again, I can't emphasize how important that is enough. If you're spending a penny in marketing without that information, you're wasting your money. So anyways, that's my rant on that.
I'm sure that our viewers know that I'm a professor of communications, and there's a lot of communications theories that I'm applying to what we're doing. Unfortunately, most of our competitors are realtors. Okay, yeah. Not trying to say anything bad about them, but that's it. So Mike, what have you got to show us?
So are we working on, here we go. There we are. All right. Can you see my screen, Scott? Okay. All right. So what I want to talk about, really, it kind of piggybacks off of, and again, everything that I talk about has a foundation in psychographics. I'm not going to use that word as much today, but I want to give you an idea of the difference between a couple of different, very popular internet advertising methods and things that you really ought to be doing within your practice. Now, in most cases, you should be doing one of each of these, if not all of them, depending on the type of advertising you're wanting to do. And I'm just going to go through these really quick. And really what I want to do is just show you the differences between what I consider are probably the best opportunities for internet advertising right now, that being Instagram, Google, Facebook, and YouTube. These are 4 different areas that frankly cannot be approached in the same way because they are as different as billboard advertising and radio advertising, to Yellow Pages advertising, to a magazine advertisement. There are huge differences in the way that you are going to approach each of these different categories and abilities to market. And if you don't do it the right way, you're going to go back to wasting a little bit of money. So let's kind of just go through each of these individuals. Hopefully I don't run out of time here. But I want to just show you the differences and give you a really, really brief introduction of how to approach each of these different mediums when you go to advertise in them. All of them can be very effective for most of you in the way that you advertise. So let's first talk about Google. Now, Google really, they didn't invent, but they really did bring the first viable advertising method to the internet years and years ago. They created their AdWords network, and AdWords has really defined internet marketing for most types of companies, including professional practice, for many, many years. It's still one that lots of doctors have no clue how to use, lots of marketers don't know how to use, but it can be extremely effective. And one of the reasons why it's so effective is because a lot of times, well, almost every time, the lead that comes from Google is self-qualified, meaning that they've already typed in dental implant, and that's how they saw your ad. And again, I'm talking about the ads that are at the top of a search engine result page. When you type in dental implants, Louisville, Kentucky, or whatever, it is those first ads that you're seeing on the top. And if you get a lead from that, and if you've advertised, and if you've put the right offer out there, you know that they're already looking at dental implants. They've already come to you and say, "Hey, I want this information," and Google has provided your information, your offer, and put it in front of them. So that's a huge, huge deal when it comes to Google advertising. Is usually the leads have already qualified themselves to some point. The great thing about it is it can be targeted by demographics. So not quite as well as some of these other methods, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it can be targeted. Now, a lot of times, just for the fact that if you have targeted the right keywords, you'll know that just that targeting alone will kind of funnel them in the direction that you need them to go. So demographically, you can do this. And again, there's some really cool things that we don't have time to go into today of ways that you can do that. One of the best things about Google is the analytics. It's really easy to track, so you know exactly what's working and what's not. That's not quite as advanced as some of these other methods are getting there, but Google really is the grand papa when it comes to analytics, and they can show you basically everything that you need to know about your campaigns. Another thing is that you have very wide exposure. Pretty much everybody uses Google, and yes, there's a few people that use a few other search engines, but the lion's share, more than that, frankly, almost everybody uses Google on their computer to do their search results. So you know that you're going to get the exposure that you need. Now, a couple of the downsides is because it is so effective, it can be quite expensive. Now, usually you pay per click on a Google campaign, and because it's been around so long and is proven, it can get a little bit more expensive, especially if you're in a competitive area or if you're in an area that is pretty marketing savvy. And this would include most urban areas, most big population centers that have good competition. Usually you've got some competition when it comes to that. And so basically, because it's set up as a bidding process, it can be more expensive per click in those areas. It's usually competitive. Again, it's been around for a long enough time that most marketers, a lot of marketers know how to do this, and they'll rely on it to some degree. And so usually in most areas, there's at least 1 or 2 doctors that are utilizing Google AdWords effectively. Okay, let's talk about, I would say, the second kind of big disruptor in this area, and that is Facebook. Facebook, their marketing engine is just, it's dramatic. It's life-changing. As a marketer, it's one of the greatest inventions ever made, because all of us put way too much information on Facebook. Facebook knows everything about you. And even the things that you haven't shared, because of the other things you share, they've made great algorithms to guess exactly what it is that you like, what state of life you're in, how much money you make, how much education you have, all of those things. Facebook is a marketing tool. That is all it is. It's not a social network. It is a marketing tool. And because of that, Facebook sells that information to the highest bidder. And I know that sounds very dirty, but Facebook can be extremely effective when it comes to delivering a message. So one thing to remember is when we advertise on Facebook, it's kind of like a Super Bowl ad. People are not self-qualified. They did not type in dental implant. They're looking at funny cat videos or whatever, or pictures of their grandkids as they're scrolling through Facebook, and all of a sudden, bam, there is an ad for a dental implant, or for a denture, or for a veterinary service, or whatever. And so it's a disruption. It's different. They weren't expecting it. And so because of that, you have to approach it a little bit differently, and you have to think in terms of, what can I do to capture this person's attention and shift their mind from whatever train of thought they were on. It can be super, super hyper demographic and psychographic targeted. You can target by a ridiculous level of demographics, so that you can really identify and only deliver your message to the perfect person that matches the profile that you want to deliver your offer to. And so that way you're not wasting your ad space, your ad dollars on people that you aren't going to qualify for whatever offer. You can be targeted by age, by income, by sex, by interest, by hobby, by so many different things. It's very, very powerful. One of the cool things about Facebook is, because it is a little younger than Google, it's usually not quite as competitive, and thus it's not quite as expensive. I found on average, this is not true for every area, but on average it's usually about half of what I would pay Google per click. And so it can be a very effective tool that doesn't cost quite as much in most areas. So kind of the little brother to Facebook is Instagram. Instagram is owned by Facebook, and so a lot of times Instagram is something that kind of accompanies whatever ads you're running on Facebook. So again, it's disruptive. They're not expecting that ad. They're looking at pictures, they're scrolling through, and all of a sudden, bam, your offer comes in front of them. It's got to be disruptive, and it's got to be very quick, because they're scrolling with their thumb that fast. And so you have to think about that. What can I do? What message can I say that's going to grab them and get them to stop scrolling for a second? It can run alongside. When you set up a Facebook ad campaign, you can click a button and it will automatically show on Instagram as well. And so it's not usually done as a separate campaign. Usually you have them together with Facebook. And the last thing is, you got to think about who it's being targeted to. I'm not going to target my 65-year-old father with an Instagram ad, because he hasn't ever even heard of Instagram. I'm going to target, if my psychographic segment is soccer moms or something of that nature, that's who I'm going to target on Instagram. Now, let's talk about YouTube. I've got 1 minute left on my presentation. YouTube is the least utilized, yet probably the widest and can be the most effective method of advertising. Now, YouTube is owned by Google, and so a lot of things analytic-wise plays into the same, but YouTube is not a highly utilized advertising method locally. It is globally. It is for big companies, usually not locally. So it's not usually very competitive. I would bet 90% of you, in whatever market you're in, do not have a competitor that is using Google for advertising. Again, can be targeted by geo, by demographics, and by hobbies, which can be really awesome. It does need to be production heavy. You need to be good. It needs to look fantastic. It needs to be video centric. So the ads can cost a little bit more to create, because that's the standard that people are used to seeing when it comes to a YouTube video. But because it's not utilized, usually it's not as expensive, especially in the suburbs or in rural areas. It's a huge, huge opportunity. I'm just scratching the surface on all of these. If you want to know more about how to get through and learn more about these systems and how it can apply to your practice, please visit us at drdemographics.com or email me directly at mike@drdemographics.com. Their opportunities are tremendous. They're huge, but until you truly understand those psychographics for your area and for your neighborhood, you're not going to be able to really effectively gather leads at the right price. And that's what we can help you to do.
Now, Mike, I want to praise you on this. That was actually one of the best explanations I've seen of the 4 social media platforms.
And I did it in like 10 minutes, Scott.
And I don't know if anybody appreciates it. You're not getting paid by these companies. So it's about as objective and real as I can imagine. So anyway,
I ought to be paid.
Very good job. I've
Thank you.
Really well. Mike came to me as an orphan child, and I raised him in a basket in the pantry.
Yes.
He's done reasonably well.
Didn't you pluck me out of a river? I was in a basket, I think.
Something like that. I don't think that was you.
Oh, okay.
Somebody in the Bible. Okay, anyway, you guys, thank you so much. Next week, we're going to be talking on another exciting topic. Remember, you can't get this stuff of this quality anywhere else. Again, thank you so much, Mike. I'll talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.
All right.